Hey there, fellow citizens of the internet. Welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast, where I have conversations that are worth having. Today, I have with me Pete Sena, and we're going to have a lot of interesting conversations, but mostly regarding creativity and technology, and more specifically on the technology side, we're going to talk about Web3 and artificial intelligence. So, without any further ado, Pete Sena, welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast.
Great to be here. Been excited to chat with you about all this stuff.
Yes, sir. So let's just dive right in. When it comes to Web3, most of us might know that as a term, but we don't really understand what it is. Like when did Web 1 occur? What's going on with Web 2? Like what's the difference? I don't really know. I just log onto the internet and I use Facebook, WhatsApp, and X, Y, and Z. Can you give us like an overview of what Web 3 is?
Yeah, for sure. So I think to give everybody an overview of Web3, I think it makes sense to sort of start from the beginning and why do they call it Web3, right? What defines that? So at the highest level, like we all use the internet, so that's not news to anybody at this point. But Web 1, just to sort of simplify it and take out the tech buzzword. So for the audience to know, I come from a design and tech background, so being able to try to simplify things can be tough sometimes. So I'm not getting into all the nerdy stuff like smart contracts and all the different things. But at the highest level, Web 1 was really like the dawn of the internet, right? It's where essentially we had a client, which is like the browser that you pull up on your computer, and then servers, and those clients connected to those servers. And at the time, those servers were computers that were in people's houses, in businesses' closets. And this is before the cloud, right? Everything was what they call it kind of on-premise. So the client, in this case, the client being your browser, would connect to the server. And we had pretty much a pretty standard internet, right? It was sort of a one-to-one relationship between the client and the server, and the way that we interchanged and exchanged information. What was special about Web 2 is the protocols got a little bit better, the interconnectivity got a little bit better. So what was special about Web 2 when everybody was going crazy about it, the first thing you might have remembered if you're as old as I am is that the internet started to look really glossy, right? Lots of shadows, lots of bubbles, lots of skeuomorphism, which is where they tried to make the internet look like the real world, so 3D and bubbly and that sort of thing. But besides the visual aesthetic of it, behind the scenes, what Web 2.0 was all about was this idea of an API, or a application programming interface, essentially. So what an API is I like to think of an API as the ability to connect different technologies together. So remember, in Web 1, we had the client and the server connecting, in a one-to-one way. And then in Web 2, people were connecting a lot of different things. So as an example, in a Web 2 world, I might have a little widget on my website that said, this is today's weather for you, right? And the way that I would get that is that particular widget would go and talk to a weather API, and it would be able to get the weather based on zip code or locale or those kinds of things. So that weather widget or that reservation widget that was embedded on a website, or that like button that was embedded on the website back in the day, you probably remember from Facebook. All of those things are sort of like early advents of like Web 2 as a concept, right? So what Web 2 made special was now you had companies and platforms and people really collaborating a little bit differently. They were interconnected. And that was really also, not at the same exact time, but around that time, a little bit later, is when we started to really get the advent of the cloud, right? So we've all heard the term like, oh yeah, it's in the cloud, it's backed up to the cloud. And well, what does that mean, right? Well, what that means is now instead of having a single server that's in Moses' basement or my basement or in a server room somewhere in a closet, what that meant is now we could host things in a distributed way. So I could go to Amazon or now Google or any cloud company, and I could host my content. So my files, my applications, those kinds of things, I could host those in the cloud. And what that basically meant was now it was no longer about a single point of failure. So if my data center burned down or the computer crashed or whatever, my whole website was gone. It was toast. It was off the internet, right? Just to kind of simplify it. And for the tech folks here, again, understand that our audience is broad, and if I go too deep into tech, I'm going to lose folks. So for my fellow engineers out there, be kind to me, please. So with that, what the cloud allowed for was a distributed environment. So I could basically have an East Coast version of my website that's hosted in an East Coast data center. I could have a West Coast version of my website duplicated and hosted in the West Coast, one in Europe. So now what does that do, right? Well, that does a couple of things for me as a business, as a brand, as a platform. One, it allows me to have a faster website, because now what I can take advantage of is if you're near the East Coast, where I live in the States here in the United States, then you can get a faster connection because the information has to travel less far. It doesn't have to go, under the ocean, which is how the internet connects together under the ocean, right? It doesn't have to go all the way across the world to get that signal, get that information and pull it back, right? So one thing is proximity, the distance it has to travel. So that made the cloud very special. So then it also allowed for performance, right? Because when you think about some of the applications I've worked on, you're talking about millions of users, right? So millions of users connecting to something, one machine, no matter how powerful it is, can kind of get bogged down. So now the cloud gives you additional computing power. It can give you, existing infrastructure, and you can scale both what they call horizontally and vertically, right? So that's one of the big things of Web 2 and the cloud was like, now you've got connections and APIs, now you've got the cloud. So that's Web 2, and that's the world that we've all known for a really long time. Many of us still live in that Web 2 world.
Yep.
So now Web 3, let's get into it, right? The stuff that we all love to talk about here, right? So Web 3 is promising a different world. So one of the problems that came about with Web 2 is this idea of the big corporation. And the big corporation is like, Google has all my data, or Amazon has all my data, or Facebook has all my data, Facebook now Meta, and we rely on them for everything, right? So, they have our data, they privacy is a little bit of a weird thing, and we end up having to trust them just blindly. What are they doing with our data? Like what engineer is like, tinkering around right now and looking at something that might be unencrypted? Who knows, right? So that then created some challenges, because now we're relying on these big corporations. We have to trust them blindly. So Web3 comes around, and Web3 says, you know what, we're going to create a decentralized world. So at the highest level, the biggest concept of Web3 that I think is worth noting is you have this idea of decentralization. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is now we don't have to rely on a single point. It's not a single company, right? And you might ask, well, how do you do that? How do you live in a decentralized world, right? Well, you do a couple different things. One is they introduce this concept of the blockchain, right? And the way I like to think about the blockchain is it's kind of like a spreadsheet in the cloud, right? So it's an immutable ledger, right? So basically, to simplify that, it's like a spreadsheet or an accounting book in the cloud that all of us can read from and all of us could write to, but we actually can't change. So it's immutable. So once that record goes into that row in the spreadsheet, you can't go back in and change it. It's on the blockchain and it's there forever. And essentially, copies of that blockchain are in multiple different locations, removing that single point of failure, removing that single point of trust. So nobody owns the blockchain. Now, I want to be clear for the folks that are new to Web3. The blockchain as a concept, there are lots of different blockchains out there. You might have heard things like Ethereum or Solana or Tezos. There's all different blockchains out there. But the main concept of a blockchain, they all primarily work in a similar fashion, which is we have this immutable ledger that is powered by cryptocurrency or a cryptography. So I don't want to get mixed up with crypto just yet, but that's what the blockchain is at the highest level. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because if you think about a world where trust can be looked at differently, where you and I can both verify that something is true, unlike having to rely on a single corporation, that's a powerful thing. So that creates a different sense of trust. That creates a different sense of transparency, because many of the blockchains, though they do have private blockchains, but many of the blockchains that we're talking about here today, I'll just use Ethereum, which is one of the more popular ones. You and I can go on right now. We can look up what's called a wallet address, and we can look at that address. It's just a series of numbers and letters, and we can see every transaction that went inside and outside of that wallet. And that is really good for things like fraud. It's really good for what's called a chain of custody, which is like, I own this thing, and then I traded it to Moses, or I sold it to Moses, and then Moses sold it to Susanna. And we can sort of see these different things identified by a wallet address.
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of different things around that. I'm trying to sort of cover a lot of big ground in a short period of time here. But those are the sort of main concepts of Web3. Started with the blockchain. Most people, when they hear Web3, they think of NFTs, they think of crypto, they think of coins, meme coins, those kinds of things. But really, you have this blockchain, And obviously a big part of this blockchain is cryptography, right? And crypto as in the crypto. And another big thing that was popular, as I mentioned about trust, is it changed financial services forever. It changed financial technologies forever, because now instead of having to rely on Amazon to have all my information in one place, or a bank to hold all my money in one place, now we started to be able to think about digital currencies, right? So now when you take the concept of digital currency, you no longer have to have everything reserved in one single bank, right? So that creates a series of other opportunities now for global economies, for transparency, and really for removing the dependency on a bank. You know, and for those of us that might remember, just recently, a number of banks just recently crashed. Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley Bank, one of the most trusted banks. You know, if it wasn't for the U.S. government bailing them out and helping them outside of the FDIC kind of guidelines, a lot of startups would have gone under. A lot of people would have been without their funds. So this is a scary thing, because we haven't had a bank run since one of the depressions a while ago. So this is where cryptocurrency gets really powerful, because now if I've got Bitcoin or Ethereum or one of these cryptocurrencies, there's a million of them, Solana, et cetera, I'm not just subscribing to a currency that has value, right? What is currency? Currency is what drives currency is the root word, which is current, and the root word of current is to flow, right? So you have principles of supply and demand, you have scarcity, you have all these different things, and the movement of these things creates liquidity, and that liquidity then has tons of value, right? So this is where now we're starting to get these really big concepts that are super powerful. You had entire countries that are, putting their currency systems on these things. So it gets really powerful, because that starts to decentralize that single point of failure. I'm excited about that. So that's cryptocurrency. Now you're like, all right, Pete, I got cryptocurrency, high level, I think. I got this decentralized stuff. I got it, I think. Well, what about NFTs? Well, one of the underlying principles that makes the blockchain really special in each of those transactions is something called the smart contract. And a smart contract is just, it's a set of programming instructions, typically done with code, and the languages are different. Solidity is one of them. But different languages in programming allow for a contract to be transparent. So the same way that a legal contract has a give and a take, it's typically mumbo-jumbo legal jargon that most of us don't understand. That's how a contract works in the old world. In the new world, code drives that. Computers drive that. Cryptography drives that. So what's powerful about a smart contract is it allows us to put a set of rules in there. And a rule could be, for example, when Moses buys this thing from me, I'm going to forever have a percentage of royalties that are going to come back to me as the creator and the person who mints. And to mint something means to create something onto the blockchain. I'm putting it onto the blockchain. So that smart contract is a set of rules that protects me, that protects Moses, that protects everyone. And it protects us because the smart contracts are transparent. You can go to them on a blockchain explorer. You can read the smart contract, and you can understand, if you have that technological capability, what these things do and what the rules of them are. Because there's a lot of shadiness that's still out there. It's the wild, wild west of sorts, right? It's the gold rush of sorts, if you will. Yep. And that's sort of like the Web3 stuff. So I can keep going if that's helpful, but I'm just kind of getting flown. Is this okay with you?
Yeah. It's great. Can we try to marry it with the create? No. I see you. I hear you. Can we try to marry it with on the creative side? So if I am a digital art creator, for example, if I am a musician, for example, and I'm kind of like the technical type, so I'm inclined to ask you, okay, how does the quantum computing thing that seems to be kind of like close, how does that affect the crypto side of things? But that would be like too technical. So let's just talk about the creative side. What does that mean?
No, we can go there. We can go to quantum. I mean, I'm broadcasting this conversation with you from New Haven, Connecticut, and Yale actually has an entire quantum computing department that they're working on quantum computing, which is a mile away from where I'm sitting. So I'm all about these future technologies. And I think once we finish explaining the concepts of Web3, because we're just about to get into NFTs, right? We had to sort of build on the stack on that. Once we get to that, happy to jump to quantum in a few minutes if that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just for creatives, what does Web3 mean for someone that's like the musician types, the art creator types, video content creating? Does that apply? Does Web3 have anything to do with the creative world yet?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it does in a lot of ways, right? So the building on the concept of that smart contract, right? So you got that smart contract, and what the smart contract does is opens up an entire realm of possibilities for any type of business, right? Everything from, if we think about right now, a very popular service that people use in America is a service called Carfax, right? It's an example I give to a lot of people. So if you go and buy a car and it's used, you want to make sure that you know who's owned that car, how many accidents it's been in, et cetera, right? So in the case of Carfax, every vehicle has a unique number called a VIN number, right? A vehicle identification number. The same way that everything on the blockchain has a unique identifier, which is kind of backed by cryptography, and to sort of simplify that, right? So why is that important? Well, that's important because I know if that car's been in crash, it's another source of truth I can look at to validate that. And the same thing happens on the blockchain. I can look at, proof of work or proof of stake, depending on, let's not go too deep into that, right? But at a high level, why is that important? Well, that's important because now what that means is we have this thing called a non-fungible token. And what a non-fungible token, or an NFT, is now we can apply a unique set of rules to a single file, to a collection of things. And why that's really powerful is if I'm a musician and I want to normally I would take my file and I'd put up on the streaming platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, etc. And people can take that file, they can copy that file, and there's no proof of legitimacy or the origin of it, right? Who has the original file? I can just copy it, right? So the power of that for artists, specifically visual artists, to start, was you started to see all these, like, if you're new to Web3 or NFTs, you started to see a bunch of like monkey images pop up on the internet, right? Different PFP projects, which is kind of like, when you see people putting their face, replacing it with like a little cartoony thing. That's where it started, right? And these were large collections of NFTs that, because of the community that was behind them, because of the roadmaps that were behind them, by having an NFT and having it in a digital wallet, right? Typically, a digital wallet is no different than a physical wallet, but the benefit to that is there's a lot more security to a digital wallet than there is a physical wallet, because if you lose it, you can sort of bring it back to life if you have the seed phrase, and that's where the cryptography comes into play, right? So why I say that, right? So now I can collect things, and the same way that I'm going to wear this brand or this color says something about who I am, the NFTs I have in my wallet say the things I believe in, right? So are there causes I believe in? Are there places that I'm a part of, or clubs that I'm a part of, right? So now why that's powerful for the artist, for the creator, is that means that they can monetize their IP. They can monetize the value of what they create and what they stand for. So one of my favorite examples that's really hit the mainstream limelight is VFriends, right? And VFriends was created by Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk is a very famous American entrepreneur. He's built a number of businesses. And because of his likeness, because of his celebrity, if you will, he's created this community of people that come together that believe in NFTs, and right now NFT is a dirty word, right? In the news is always looking for someone to pick on, pick on a president, pick on a politician, pick on a category, right? So after they feasted their blood on NFTs, and we saw sort of crypto kind of start to crash a little bit, now they're feasting their blood on AI, and we'll come back to that, I'm sure, in a little bit, because I know, Moses, you and I both have a love for that. But
yeah,
the creator economy, I think, is being driven in a very unique way. And I think the power of NFTs is that it can create scarcity, it can create access, and it can signal community. And I'm very big into NFTs still to this day. I think that what happened in crypto was you had a bunch of people getting into cryptocurrencies, NFTs, et cetera. So naturally, that inflation of interest drove rising prices across the board. The value of these tokens went up. There wasn't a lot of regulation across the world in different governments and whatnot. So it was kind of the wild, wild west. And now, many people are saying that don't really get it. They're like, oh, NFTs are a scam and, crypto's a waste of your money, et cetera, et cetera. But really, the people like you and me, we know that this is the future. It might take 1 year, it might take 10 years, it might take 100 years. We don't know. I personally believe that some of the smartest people are still really deep into crypto and Web3, and it ain't going anywhere, because I think what it represents as a society is an evolution to how we exist. It's an evolution to how we have a sense of ownership on something. And I think that in a world that's going to be much more digital first, right, where my kids will grow up, your kids will grow up, and they won't delineate between the real world and the digital world. It won't be IRL in real life. It'll be just life. So as a result of it, if we live in a world that is borderless and boundaryless, where you're in Lisbon and I'm in New Haven, but we're connected, like we're in the same room, when we start having things like spatial reality, spatial computing with Apple just signal with their Vision headset, when Mark Zuckerberg's vision for the metaverse really comes to life and we can be in the same room together, well, what are we going to be wearing in those rooms? What are those? What is the swag we're going to be wearing? What are the brands we're going to be wearing? That's the power for the creator, because now the creator can say, I created this custom shirt. It's created by Moses. It's tied back to this smart contract and tied back to this NFT. And now I can prove this is my shirt. And if I try to copycat it, I'm going to get clowned on, because I'm going to be able to go back and people can call my bullshit out, right?
Yeah.
That's the power of Web3, is it elevates the need for trust and truth and transparency. And it removes how easy it is to be illegitimate, right? And I think that a world with less bullshit is going to be a better world. So that's where I just think that it stacks this stuff. So whatever kind of creator you are, I mean, you can make an NFT of anything. I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine who made $30,000 or $40,000 US by offering an exclusive PDF if you bought an NFT, right? So by buying this NFT, hidden in the metadata, you would get you would be able to unlock a artifact. In this case, it was a PDF, and it had a bunch of strategy information and consulting information, but you had to pay for it. And at the time, I think it was 1.5 ETH when ETH was over $2,000 US. So it was a pretty expensive thing. I have another friend of mine who used NFTs as a fundraising mechanism to launch a 3D TV show, basically, on the internet, right? I have another friend who used NFTs to launch a physical art show in New York City, one of the biggest art locations in the world. And these are all possible because of NFTs, because of the blockchain, right? These are unheard of concepts that even just 5 years ago, 6 years ago, were completely foreign, and now they're part of an everyday thing. So I hope that answers your question, Moses, and hopefully for the guests kind of gives a framing of just why I'm so damn excited about this stuff.
What do you think what do you think is the largest entry gap, or what keeps a lot of people from even taking the first step into understanding or interacting with the NFT world? Because it's a buzzword, it's out there, but there's also some news that are denigrating it and saying a lot of negative stuff about it. But yeah, in your opinion, what do you think is the biggest barrier of entry when it comes to engaging with the world of the NFT?
I think the answer to the question, we fear what we don't understand. And as a result of the fact that we fear what we don't understand, I think that many of these concepts can be a bit daunting to folks, right? So that's why I believe that platforms like Coinbase are really important. Some people would say to hold things on Coinbase, you're crazy. You should have, take it, if you don't own your keys, you don't own your crypto, and that you have to make sure. So don't just put it through an exchange and rely on somebody else, because if they go under, you lose your crypto, and that's absolutely true. But I think companies and platforms like Coinbase are really important because they are taking the complexity out for the end consumer, right? So when you think about the classic early adopter curve, we've probably seen that curve where on the left side you have the early adopters and the right side you have the laggards and the late majority, right? What does that mean? Well, the early adopter is not afraid to play and make mistakes and experiment, right? The laggard is sort of waiting for the general populace to catch up to it. So I think right now, NFTs are a scary thing because a lot of people that went into it, they didn't understand what they were buying. They didn't they were just blindly trying to make a quick buck. And as a result of it, when you don't understand what you're doing, it's easy to lose money. So I think that the challenge with this right now is the way that this is going to get more mainstream again is, one, we have to focus on value, right? Value for the people that are buying these things, value for the people that are creating these things or getting involved in these things. And when you focus on value or utility, it's that value, it's that utility that really makes these digital collectibles or digital objects, which is funny. Language is how we experience the world, right? People don't even like people like us. We don't even use the word NFTs anymore, right? Because when we say NFT, we know that like the mainstream is like whatever. So if we say digital collectibles or digital objects, it's a different conversation, right? So I just believe that the biggest thing right now is this is a universal thing, in my opinion, which is fear and ignorance drives bad behavior. And I think we see that in a lot of ways, right? You know, we see that in different communities who don't understand one another, different races who don't understand one another, different ethnicities and sexual orientations that don't understand one another. And that's where I think that we become divided. But the power of Web3, in my opinion, is it is the ability to unify us under a set of agreeing common principles. And that's why I'm so freaking excited about it, because some of the best and coolest people I've ever met, I've met because of Web3 communities. I've met them on a Discord or at a meetup group or that sort of thing. And just the openness and the willingness to try new things, like that's the kind of people I want to be around, and that's the kind of society I want to be a part of.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So let's touch on the quantum stuff. Like this whole world Web3 thing it hasn't really like become the day-to-day way of doing life. And like you said, you touched on cryptography being the key word there. And then you have this quantum computing thing that at least on the theory side of things seems to be threatening the cryptography part of this whole Web3 thing. So meaning like if I have a quantum computer, I might be able to decrypt whatever your wallet is or your Web3 application. I can take that apart and I can get access to all this all this information, skipping that whole transparency side of things that is so critical to Web3. What's your view on? But yeah, what do you make of all this? And is there any validity to even thinking of this way?
Absolutely. So it would take me some time to explain to you in this audience the differences between hashing, cryptography, and some of those things. And while I wouldn't say by any means I'm an expert in them, what I would say is I fully understand and grasp the concepts, and I've done some things with it. So you've got the common words that people have probably heard is words like proof of stake or proof of work. And really what that comes down to is on a blockchain, you know, we've probably all heard the term like mining for cryptocurrency, right? And like that idea of having validators that confirm transactions, and these validators are really important, right? And those validators confirm those transactions and they create blocks essentially on this blockchain. Or proof of work is using sort of like competitive validation by like confirming these transactions. So that requires intense amounts of computational power and intense amounts of, think of it like code breaking, right? Like that's where the cryptography ciphers are really, really important. So right now, based on the way that these blockchains are set up and the current versions of them, they are based on our current computing power. And if you're familiar with things like Moore's Law and those kinds of things, every time these chips get smarter, faster, smaller, less expensive, we all have access to more computing power. You know, I have more access in this iPhone, on this new iPhone, in terms of computing power, graphics processing units, CPU, GPU, memory, etc., than one of my first computers, right? One of my first computers couldn't do a fraction of what this thing can do. And this fits in my pocket, right? So why is that important? Well, when you move to quantum, we now have a different level of computing power that can work at an exponentially faster rate of pace. So what this basically means for the blockchain is like, if all of a sudden tomorrow quantum was the next thing that everybody had, truthfully, what would have to happen is all the blockchains would just have to fork. We'd have to update the software on these blockchains. I'm trying to simplify it, so forgive me, because I don't want to lose my whole audience here. But people would be like, crypto, like quantum, updating, forking. What are we having dinner? What are you talking about? But I think in theory, we'll be able to fork and update how the blockchains work. That will then be able to make the cryptography capabilities of these blockchains in more alignment with quantum, which will mean that the fears you're talking about in terms of like, can we completely crack, like for example, think about password cracking, right? Like we'll use passwords for an example because people understand it. If you've got a password that has letters and numbers, it's harder to crack. If you have a password that has letters, numbers, and symbols, it's even harder to crack. If you have a password that has letters, numbers, symbols of different uppercase, lowercase, the longer and more complex that password is, the harder it is for me to crack, for me to run a generator back and forth to try to crack that password, right? So cryptography is very similar to that. It takes time, it takes computing power, it takes math to be able to unlock that. When we go to quantum, we're going to need to make sure that these blockchains are then updated and upgraded to support quantum computing, because the paradigms at a simple level will be that much more unique in terms of what computers can do and how they can do a combination of threading and parallel processing in a new paradigm. So I hope that answers the question. That's the easiest way I think of how I can explain it, at least in this context.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Essentially, just to kind of summarize it, you're saying that Web3 will adapt to the new challenge. It will as quantum becomes a normal thing, like tomorrow, then Web3 will respond by also adapting its locking mechanism, its cryptography, in order to match what quantum is bringing to the table.
It's like I think it's like any evolution, Moses, right? Like if you think about when we used to build things back in the day, we would build it with picks and shovels, right? And we would dig in dirt. And then with the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, we moved from, humans using picks and shovels to machines that can dig dirt for us. And now we're moving to the next era of the Industrial Revolution, which really comes down to not just the internet, not just machines, but now we've got robots and cobots, and now we've got autonomous things, right? So now we can program a digital twin of what we want that building to look like, or that thing to look like, or that tech to look like, and now it's being created. So yes, I think to your point, all technology, all civilization, all society gets to a point of expansion, and I like to think of everything like software, right? Where it's like 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, 6.0, whatever it is. I believe that we have some really smart people working on these blockchains because it's decentralized. It takes on the principles of open source, which is very community driven. It's very team driven. It's not beholden to a single corporation. So I believe that when we get quantum to a place where everyone has access to it, and it's the same way that I can pull out my cell phone and we've all got a smartphone now, I think that that's going to be the case as well. So I'm not that worried about it. That being said, I think that there's a lot of things in life where if we say, okay, well, when this thing happens, all this stuff breaks. When this thing happens, all this stuff breaks. And they're not wrong, but it's like, that's like, I'm guessing the next place you want to take this conversation is AI. And it's like, well, when an AI can do this, like, why will Moses and Pete even be having this conversation when we can just have digital avatars of Pete and Moses that are automatically plugged into their consciousness? And yeah, that might happen one day, but right now we're here having a conversation,
Right, right. So that's a perfect segue into AI. Is that 2, 3 weeks ago I found out about this program called Autopod, and it's just a Premiere Pro plugin, and you download it, and it for long form video conversations like this, it edits it in like, I don't know, 10 seconds, and I was just mind blown. And I had been using Adobe products for about 10 years, and last year I had completely stopped and switched over to DaVinci because I love the workflow. I love just not having not the blue screen of death, but it will freeze a lot. And I'm just kind of switching back as of 3 weeks ago back to Adobe because of this Autopod. So I didn't see it as a oh my goodness, I can't really edit anymore, I'm completely useless. It's like, whoa, no, this is amazing. I'm spending like an hour and a half to 2 hours going back and forth, cutting these things, and now I can just do 10 seconds, cut everything up, and then focus on the creative sides. I can zoom in, I can change angles, I can do this. So it's giving me back a lot more of my time, and then I can take that time and focus more into the creative side. But that is a perspective of my own. There's someone else somewhere else, I might be like, this is my 9 to 5, this is all I do, and my days are numbered, right? So, take it away. Like what is there validity in this fear of hey, AI is gonna take away all kinds of jobs, and how true is it, right? And how practical does this fear mean? I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah. So the fear is real. There will be millions and millions of jobs that are completely eradicated and eliminated because of AI. I think right now, unless you are a plumber or a physical trades person, any job in the any knowledge worker's job is going to be completely displaced and disrupted. So here's the bottom line, folks. If you're a knowledge worker, so if you use digital software and tools every day, if you're using a computer versus your back and your hands every day, you're going to be very heavily disrupted in the next 12, 24, 36 months and beyond. I would go on to venture to say that university programs right now that are having freshmen do things, by the time those freshmen graduate that college or that university, the knowledge that they learn will be completely extinct. Jobs will no longer exist in those areas. But let's talk about the good side of that, right? Here's the bottom line. AI is not coming for your jobs, but someone using AI is. There will no longer be a world in the future where we do not have an AI to support us in the work that we do. I believe that every single person in the near future, will have an autonomous agent that's in their pocket, that's connected to different technologies, that can perform a number of different mundane, automated, administrative tasks that nobody really wants to do, right? Let's talk about video editing for a second, because you mentioned Autopod. I'm very familiar with it. I've used tools like Cast Magic or Opus Clip, and many of these tools use artificial intelligence to automate and decide on our behalves how to create short clips for social media, how to edit things, remove excess noise in a clip, filter out using AI and these different machine learning algorithms, how to do different things, or models, excuse me, but it is algorithms, but machine learning models is what I meant to say. So I want us to think about augmentation, not eradication, right? How do we augment the jobs we do, not eradicate the jobs we do? Because as a storyteller, the difference between an editor that works on a feature movie versus someone who just knows how to open up Premiere or Final Cut, the difference is their ability to tell a story. Their difference is their ability to communicate something, to evoke an emotion or a feeling. So I dream of a day when creators like yourself, Moses, creators like myself, we can think more about the story, about the emotions, about the interconnection of conversation and community, and then let the boring stuff of like clipping and clip organization and file naming, let that stuff be done with computers. But I think it's important for us to understand, I've used all these AI clip creators and they're getting much better. You know, we use a lot of like text to image software like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and these things are only as good as the models that they have, and the models are only as good as the information we feed them and the people we have that are classifying them. So I think humans play a very big role in the growth of AI. Everything's changing, right? And we can go deeper down this, and I can answer any question you want based on my perspective. But what I'm really excited about is how AI can make us smarter, AI can make us faster, AI can make us better, so that we can spend more time with our families and friends. We can fill our times more with the things we want to do in our lives, right? One of the gifts of COVID, we all know the curse of COVID, but one of the gifts of COVID is all of us realized that we didn't just have to be robots on autopilot, going to work every day, sitting in long commutes and doing that. Folks like yourself who travel for a living and you're a creator yourself, like you've cracked the code for life, which is like, I'm not going to be chained to a desk and working a 9 to 5 every single day and working to live, living to work, not working to live. This is where I think that the world is changing fast, and why I'm so excited about the creator economy. I'm so excited about AI, because what we're talking about here is a very big concept, right? Which is the concept of leverage. Why do you go on Autopod and pay $19 or $30 a month or $50 a month or whatever? Everyone's different, right? Why do we pay that? Because your time is worth more than $30 for you to save hours a week, hours a month, right? And that spending that money creates leverage, right? Hiring people or technologies or AIs creates leverage. And now, if you think about it, who drives the ideas? Who drives the concepts? It's the director. It's the executive. It's the person higher in the hierarchy. Now, I don't like hierarchy, and that's a whole other podcast discussion. But what I like about this is what previously was 3 or 4 people's jobs, that if you're just creating a hobbyist podcast or side business, you can't afford to hire those people and still pay yourself and still take care of you and your family. But now with the advent of AI, you could pay $30 or $50 for this tool. You could use a cloud subscription like, Canva, or in my case, Figma, or whatever the tools are that you use, right? And the benefit of that is you're creating leverage. And that's the difference between really successful entrepreneurs that, have teams and tools and technologies and things, as they understand the power of leverage versus the people where I come from, where you came from, where we had to do all that work ourselves, right? I had to write 60, 70 hours of code and do 100 hours worth of design so I could put a website up on the internet, which is the world I come from as an entrepreneur, right? Now I got softwares where I can push a couple buttons. I can say, I want a website landing page for a personal trainer that does this, this, and that. I push a button and a website pops up on the internet. So now that lets me focus on the message. That lets me focus on the strategy. That lets me focus on the things that are going to move the needle for the business versus tinkering with like HTML and a CSS tag on a website for a few hours, or writing some JavaScript code that's just going to make a thing pop up and animate on a website. Is that a good use of your time, my time, or the audience's time? Or it would be better for us to be here in this room together having a conversation about what we seek and dream in life.
Yeah, that's well put. That's well put. An example that I gave I was having a conversation with a different friend, and we're talking about the days of the early days, the infancy of the telephone. How when you made a phone call, someone was on the other side actually routing you to where you needed to be. All those people obviously lost their jobs because, we don't really need those anymore. But how many more have been created since the smartphone, right? Or the invention of the car? Every business that revolved around creating carriages and horses and this and that, all those businesses are gone. But how many more have been created to design and make the roads and the rubber for the tires and this and that and the plastics? I mean, it's just so many more have come from that, and it's been about a century or so since then. So that just kind of complements what you were saying earlier, that yeah, there's going to be a lot of loss, but the positives, my goodness, the positives are
I think there's going to be a lot of change, right? So would you mind if I unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, of course.
So I love that you use the example of the carriage in the car, because we all know about Henry Ford, right? And Henry Ford's got this famous quote, whether there's a lot of famous quotes from Henry Ford, but didn't mean to get tripped up. But what I was going to say very simply is, when Henry Ford went out, if he asked his customers, "What do you all want?" they'd say, I want a faster horse and carriage. We wouldn't have the car, right? If people said, "I want a more customized car," we wouldn't have the production facility that managed to spit out mass production of cars, right? I'm pretty sure Henry Ford also created the concept of the weekend and the 9-to-5 job, if my memory suits me correctly. I definitely want to fact check that one. But at the highest level, disruptive innovation is more about change and advancement than it is about destruction. And, not to get all meta on you, but it's like every time someone dies, we end a chapter, we begin a new chapter, right? Seasons come and seasons go. And I think this idea of evolution, this idea of advancement is what I'm really excited about as an optimist in these creative technologies. I think change is the only constant, and the only thing that will never change in life is change itself. Period. So for me, what I get excited about is like, how are these jobs going to get better and more exciting? How can we create more value as people? Like, I believe the single greatest competitive difference and competitive differentiation that any person in any job in any industry can bring to the table is one thing: creativity. Competitive differentiation, right? When I hire people, and I've hired hundreds of people from multiple different companies, probably even more than that if I had to guess. And when I think about this, I want to hire people who have a good attitude, who have an aptitude to learn, know how to unlearn, and most importantly, curiosity and creativity. Because that ability to think critically, that ability to use these tools is no different than when we were in caves using flint to spark things and create campfires for ourselves, right? That human creativity, that curiosity spirit, that purpose spirit, that's the future, right? So when I see someone who doesn't want to change, who wants to dig in their heels, that reminds me of a civilization like the Luddites. And we all know what happened to the Luddites, right?
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to dig in my heels here a little bit. So too much change too fast, at least in my head, it is indistinguishable from chaos. And holding on to the current way of doing things, well, that keeps civilization from advancing. And I actually think that's pretty much impossible, given our innate wanting to explore and try new things. So assuming that what I just said has some level of validity, are we moving too fast? Is this whole Web3 AI moving too fast, where for some the speed of advancement is indistinguishable from chaos, in that today, my goodness, I just learned how to use this thing called a computer, and then now you're saying that there's this other thing, and then there's this. Wow, what's going on? Slow down. Is there some validity in that, or it's just you get with the program or you don't, and life will just do its thing? Where those that fail to evolve, well, nature does with them what nature does.
Oh, I love this conversation, Moses, and I'm so grateful for this time with you today. Just so delighted to have it. So I want to go back to chaos for a moment, right? I think that chaos comes down to comprehension. What I mean by that specifically is what might feel chaotic to me you might have complete understanding of the concepts, right? So I think chaos in some cases is just our ignorance or our inability to be able to understand the mathematics and the things that are happening, right? I'm a huge believer in causality. I'm a huge believer in correlation. And as for like the Darwin natural selection stuff, like, yes, do I like how fast this stuff is going? No, I'm a technologist myself. I've worked years. I've spent 20 plus years building skill sets that now a computer is replacing in 20 seconds.
Right.
And that's hard, right? That's hard because I'm like, oh my God, I just spent 20 years building these skills and they're basically useless now. So I have so much empathy for people that are feeling this, where their jobs are being eradicated and they've worked so hard to curate these skills. I don't love the fact that, you know, after I put my 2-year-old son to bed at night, when I should just be like relaxing or going to bed early or watching Netflix, I'm popping up my computer and I'm reading about quantum computing and I'm digging into, you know, AI algorithms and different machine learning models. And I'm, you know, spending hours on Hugging Face, which is a community for AI models and stuff. Sorry, people are like, what do you mean Hugging Face? And so I'm on this platform and I'm reading this code and I'm teaching myself more Python. I haven't been a software engineer full time in 15 years. I write software every week. I read a lot of code, but I've got amazing engineering teams that, you know, are a million times better than I could ever be at it, right? My role is in connecting the dots and driving the vision and the culture and the connection. So yes, I don't love how fast it's moving, but here's the reality. I can love or hate how fast it's moving, but I have a choice right now. This train is going and it ain't slowing down. So I can either be on the train, I can either be making things happen, watching things happen, or letting things happen to me. And I choose to be the person that's making things happen and being on the train. I invite you, which already you are doing it already, I invite your audience to be on that train because it ain't slowing down. And it's gotten to a pace of change now. It's gotten to a pace of advancement that I think is not just beyond our level of control, but I believe also beyond our level of comprehension. But I think that it's the people who are out there in the chaos, in the fog of war, that are continuing to try to make sense of it and tap into it. Those are the ones that will be the victors in the future, I believe. Those are the ones that will still be standing after they've been knocked down from the storms that will come from this. That's my belief system, at least. And is it exhausting? Fuck yeah, it's exhausting. I'm tired as hell, right? I'm also excited as hell. So I think that, you know, we can choose how to feel with this stuff, but you know, the choice I think we have to make is, unless we're all going to go, you know, live in Guam or in a place where, you know, it's a much better civilization because we don't have the internet and Instagram and that sort of thing. You know, part of me wonders, like, maybe that's a better way to live a life, right? Is to grow up in a place that has that. But yeah, I don't know. That's just my hot take on it. I hope that's valuable for you.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, what do you see being some of the dangers of AI? So just to kind of like shoot off into the stars here, you have the skeptics that are taking some of the extreme examples, such as, let's say, what's that, Neuralink, that, you know, it might get implanted into people's heads, and then next thing you see, Uncle Sam has control of every single one of us and basically turn us into apes or bananas, or and then you have some that are saying, hey, this is the greatest invention that the humans have ever come up with, and we need to push further. We need to break things and break things fast, and we need to decentralize everything and rewrite and restructure how we go about living, because this AI thing is gonna really revolutionize how we live. And I don't know if I just made justice to what I think the two extremes are, but how do I phrase this? Would you say that some people are not taking the dangers of AI seriously enough, and or do you think we really haven't taken any step that closely resembles danger when it comes to AI?
Lot to unpack there. So let me see if I can piece by piece answer all of those questions. Really great questions. So first, I think the single greatest danger that AI presents is disinformation and manipulation. I think that AI is going to fundamentally rewrite the operating system of the human condition and how we think and how we feel and how we operate. And I think that we have to be very, very careful about that. The fact that I can use a deep fake that looks exactly like you, sounds exactly like you, and puts words literally in your mouth, I can damage an amazing reputation that you've spent your entire life building, and I can do that in a snap of a finger. That, to me, is scary as hell. I am scared what some of the malicious actors out there in the world have done, or what technologies they have, right? Whether that's governments or nation states or individual hackers, whatever it is, right? I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but you know, I'm sure you saw it, or I'm sure your audience saw it, but like when you had the Weeknd and the Drake song that was a deep fake that literally blew up on the internet, went viral, sounded amazing, by the way, and the entire thing was fake, right? When you have popular figures, political figures, celebrities that are being deep faked, it scares the hell out of me. So there's the misinformation, the disinformation component. That scares me. There's I personally believe that when we released, when OpenAI released ChatGPT, they put an AK-47 in the hands of a 5-year-old. That's what I believe. And yeah, it's a bold statement. It's a little bit scary, but that technology, as much good as it's going to create as much bad. And that's not, I think, a function of a single organization or a single technology. This is human nature. You're going to see the best and the worst. We see that with the internet. You know, no matter how good we get with moderation, you know, what is free speech? What isn't free speech? I mean, that's a whole other conversation in itself, right? I'm not qualified to have that discussion. But as a technologist, as a creative, what I can say is these technologies present an existential threat to our well-being more than they present an existential threat to our civilization, in my opinion. And what I mean by that specifically is that these things and social media has already completely broken our mental health. I live in America, and the depression rates, the suicide rates, the cyberbullying is at an all-time high. You know, back when I was a kid, and, you know, I was a really nerdy, skinny kid. I used to get made fun of a lot when I was a kid. It's, you know, probably one of the reasons why I'm here with you today is because I've had to right those wrongs. But when I went home from school at the end of the day, the bullying stopped. Now, for some of these kids, the bullying doesn't stop. The pressures don't stop. The constant notifications and buzz, Discord notification, Slack notification, email notification, social media notification. Do I get liked? Am I unliked? Am I part of a group? Not part of a group? Am I being made fun of? Is someone taking a picture of me that when I'm a kid that I'm have to live with for the rest of my life because it never goes away? Like, I have so much empathy for children today, for civilization today, and that's just social media. We haven't even started to talk about AI, right? Now we start making content automatically. You know, we see platforms like Synesthesia or what Unreal Engine's done. You know, the ability to recreate yourself as a digital avatar is here today, not just tomorrow. So what that basically means is our ability to interact or not interact, keyword or not interact, I think is really, really sped up. And what I feel like is I don't feel like we're ready for it. You know, I knew ChatGPT was going to be a problem and an opportunity when I was in my Uber, in the back of an Uber driving, like a couple weeks into it being launched. And my Uber driver's like, hey, did you play with this ChatGPT thing? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And I say that because this is someone who doesn't have a technology background. This is someone who is a part of the gig economy. And this technology, the reason why it's the fastest growing product in history is because they took things that were really common, like text messaging, back and forth messaging, and they wrapped an interface on top of a completely powerful technology. So yes, I think that a lot of these organizations, OpenAI, Facebook Meta, Google, Amazon, I think that they all need to really deeply consider the implications of the things that they release and that they create. But here's the problem, right? I'll go back to that Future of Life Institute post that came out a couple months ago, where everyone signed this petition to say, slow down, AI research labs, slow down, slow down. Yeah. People signed the petition, but no one stopped. No one slowed down. You know, it's kill or be killed. And that, unfortunately, I think is the mindset that the species of us as humans has started to get attached to. And for me, that shit's scary. And it's scary to me. Like, I have clients now, you know, I work with some of the biggest brands in the world, right? And I have clients now that'll call my team and they'll be like, well, why is that going to take this much time? Like, I just put this into ChatGPT and I got an answer. So then I'll coach my team through it and I'll say, well, hold on. Let's look at what you got, client, from ChatGPT. Let's look at what we did for you. Let's look at which one performed better. Let's look at what, well, yeah, I can see that yours is better, but is it worth that much money? So now we're having to battle this as a competitor, when really, is it a competitor? And the argument I could say for and against is like, this is scary, right? Because it's like, if you're a client and you believe in test and learn, you could generate 100 headlines with ChatGPT or a tool like that. I'm using ChatGPT because everyone knows it, but there's a million tools, you know, Jasper, Copy AI, you know, Write Sonic. I mean, there's a million of them out there, right? And if you folks want to get like a list of all these tools, just, you know, shoot me a tweet or whatever, and I'll send you like a whole list of them in one place for you. So you don't have to go play Google like I did all day. But that I think is important, because if I can test 30 headlines in 30 seconds and I could run them all with a algorithm using, you know, Facebook's buying platform or TikTok's buying platform, and I can just test what works, well, then as a creative, what's better? Right? To test an unlimited amount of variations to see which one sticks, or to just try to get it right the first time. And I think this is where it's like, it's not this or that, it's a combination in between. And this is where I think that humans and machines need to co-create, need to work together, because the more we put our brains and our systems and our world on autopilot, the more we get disconnected and disassociated from the thing that we are wired to do fundamentally, which is to connect. So are you connecting or disconnecting with these technologies? And that's the question that I offer to you in the audience.
Okay, that's a very powerful insight. Are you familiar with the term prompt engineer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would consider myself an amateur prompt engineer, because I've been working with these large language models for, you know, a couple of years now at this point. I remember going back to when it was, you know, I think it was GPT-2 was when I started really doing a lot of work with LLMs, specifically trying to figure out, you know, what's the ghost in the machine? You know, how do you construct a prompt or a set of words and questions and things that get you back the output that you want? So yeah, I fancy myself a prompt engineer. Okay,
that's the biggest excitement that I have when it comes to, like, particularly with ChatGPT. It forces me to not be lazy with how I use my words and how I construct phrases. So aside from that, I feel like you already said it better. The classes that are graduating today, they're pretty much learning disciplines that are gonna be useless in not so long from today. Would you say that prompt engineering can become a career, can become something that you can learn, be good at, and use it specifically in this new AI world that we're moving into?
So at face value, yes. In a deeper level, no. Okay. So, yeah. So many of the well-constructed prompts are available for free or for a few dollars right now, right? Many of the folks that are creating these tools, there are thousands and thousands of tools popping up every single month on Product Hunt, on whatever website you want to go to. There's entirely tools that aggregate all the new AI tools. So prompt engineering is going to be no different than, if you're in a business today, you have to know how to use email and probably Slack, right? In tomorrow, you're going to need to know how to do prompt engineering the same way that you use these tools. It's going to be just a universal tool. You're not going to put on your resume, I know how to email. You're not going to put in your resume, I know how to prompt engineer. But right now, people are putting in their LinkedIn profiles. There was that thing that went around the internet saying someone got a prompt engineering job for $300,000 US or something a year. Yes, it's important, but I think that it's like everything else, it's going to get commoditized, right? I'll use an example. Jasper is a tool that right now is really, they've been on the forefront of like, you click a button and you want a Facebook ad and it gives you a Facebook ad. And underneath the hood, it does all that prompt engineering for you. They just ask you a couple of keywords to plug in. I built a prompt engineering tool, which I'm happy to share with you offline, that you can install in your browser, and it's got a bunch of pre-built things. Like I've got a tool that auto scrapes a site and does a bunch of things with it, whether it's, writes content, reformats content, summarizes content, views it from different perspectives. I mean, like, these are things that like I spent a lot of time doing, but once you release that out there, now everyone has access to it. So I think that the challenge with prompt engineering is that the tools that people are creating are getting better and better and better. So then what ends up happening is it's kind of like the Uberification of the world, right? Where back in the day you had to call a taxi, you had to hail a taxi, you had to, probably pay with cash or whatever. Then they had a world where the taxi, you'd call the taxi, they'd show up and you'd pay with Apple Pay or Samsung Pay or whatever it is. Now you have a world where you push a button and everything gets handled for you with one click, right? That's exactly what's going to happen with prompt engineering. So my average prompt right now that I write, that I'll feed to Anthropic, which is, Claude, or that I'll feed to ChatGPT or an OpenAI API call, or one of the many other tools that we use here, like Perplexity, et cetera. I mean, we're using a bunch of them, right?
Okay.
I have a list of these things that I run. My prompts are paragraphs long. I want you to think like this and do this. Here's the context. I mean, I've written guides about this stuff, right? So today, all that information's out there, which means that tomorrow, all the new tools are going to do that for you. So they're going to understand your intent. Hey, I want a picture of a guy wearing a flannel shirt. And they're going to be like, okay, well, what do you want the guy to look like? And I'll say, surprise me. And whatever. Now, this is where I think that like the people who are training the LLMs, the people who are close to the magic that happens, that's where I think we're going to see some really magic stuff happening, right? Like to train the trainer is to own the ecosystem, right? So if you look at right now, like one of the most popular LLMs in the world is ChatGPT 3.5, right? Obviously, I use GPT-4, the fourth version of it, but they're working on new LLMs right now. Everyone has an LLM, right? So if you understand the underlying principles of the LLM and how to understand the weights and how to understand those flavors, that's where the power lies. To be able to say that like Midjourney is a text to image creation tool, right? Like, I remember when someone was trying to get like, a superhero, but they didn't want just the face. It'd be like, I remember the prompt that was going around the internet was like a full body shot of a superhero wearing a and then there was a couple of different weights that you could put in, or you could pass it an image URL, or you could do these things. And that was like super important. And like I was doing some really cool shit and I felt like I was a total badass. And then 2 weeks later, they launched a new feature and they're like, push this button and I don't have to do that anymore. So I think understanding how large language models work at a high level is going to enable every person to be able to get the right value out of it. But would I put all my effort on learning something once and just figuring I can just keep eating off that forever? I don't think no. I think the two biggest skills that any person can learn that will never go extinct is the ability to learn and the ability to unlearn, no matter what the topic is, no matter what the concept is. And that's where I am trying to future-proof myself from being replaced from the robots.
Wow, Pete, I think that is a very good place to stop. I really like that. Learn to learn and learn to unlearn. Speaking for myself, I think the unlearning part is probably much harder to, one, recognize what it is that you need to unlearn, and two, finding the proper steps to take to unlearn. But it's so crucial, so crucial. I really, really thank you for that insight. Is there anything else that you wanted to add just as we come to a close here?
The one thing we didn't talk a lot about today, which I think is a big threat to not just AI and our own humanity, but also just people in general, is bias. I think that the people that are working on these systems, the data that is training these systems, I think I implore all of us that have the smallest or the largest roles in this to understand that we have to make sure that we're being curious and we're being diverse in the work that we're doing, so that we don't end up in a situation where it's white guys driving what goes into these tools. Because I think that there is so many more perspectives and amazing things in the world that if we're not training these data sets, these image classifiers, these video classifiers, these diffusion models, if we're not doing that, I think that we run the risk of alienating and not representing people that I think will really limit us as a species and a civilization. And bias is something we didn't talk a lot about today, but I think that bias is really, really, really scary. One of the more common examples, just to kind of put a face on it, is if you were to go into some of the earlier classifications. And I think I have to say, I applaud Sam Altman at OpenAI. I applaud Nadala at Microsoft, the CEO, and a lot of the work that they're doing for being much more inclusive. But, a classic example is if you looked at the Leon 5B, which is the 5 billion record database that a lot of the researchers were working on a year ago or so, that data set, if you put the word Asian in, it would almost always generate pornographic images of women, because of the volume of images that were in that database that were classified with that. I was talking to one of my colleagues about this yesterday, specifically not about that one thing. We were talking about classification, and he was using the example of an elephant, right? Well, an elephant has a tusk, an elephant has a trunk, an elephant has this. So the machine can't delineate between what is an elephant versus what is a tusk unless we tell it the difference, right? So there's a really great video on OpenAI's website, which you should totally include in the show notes. And it explains how DALL-E 2 works and explains how diffusion models work. So that, I think, is a really good exercise for people to go through to understand that what makes great AI is human reinforcement learning. That's what made ChatGPT 3 as magical as it is. It's both a knowledge engine, a little bit of a reasoning engine, and then that human reinforcement learning is what made it so damn good. It's what made it more than just autocomplete guessing the next word. So I think bias is something we didn't talk about today that I'm very passionate about, because I don't want a world that just looks like me, that just thinks like me. I want a world where no matter who you are, what you look like, where you grew up, we all have a seat at the table. And I think that if we're going to all have a seat at the table, and these AIs are going to be driving the way that we think and act and make as creators, it's very important that what goes into these machines represents global civilization and not just people who are, came from wealth and grew up in San Francisco. That's sort of something I believe really strongly in. And, what I'm doing about it, the part that I'm playing is I'm creating spaces and places. I have a co-working space here in Connecticut called District. And on that campus, we often invite folks in from various communities. We've got a creative apprenticeship program where we bring people in that either are at-risk youth, or we've done a summer camp for kids that teach them design thinking. We've done different things for people that come from at-risk or challenging socioeconomic backgrounds. So really, I believe that inviting people in to co-create together, to have access to these technologies early, to demystify them, to take out all the techie whiz-bang, that I believe is where I'm trying to do my part to be a good citizen of this world and make sure that the privileges that I was afforded, that not everyone had, they have. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, is like, we got to understand that like the next era of AI is not just about somebody's job getting replaced or displaced. It's about, what about all the people that we're leaving behind? Because these LLMs are not trained on opinions and influences that they have. And that's where I think we've got a lot of work to do, both as a society and a civilization. And I implore the Sam Altmans of the world to continue to fight the good fight, because I think that his head and heart is in the right place. Just the fact that you've got the CEO of one of the fastest growing tech companies is a openly gay man is a very powerful thing. This was something that like you would not have seen in tech 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And that's just a start, right? We need more women. We need more people of color. We need more people from different walks and talks of life. So that's something I've just got a lot of heart for. So I wanted to make sure to include it before we wrapped up today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for including that. If I can summarize that, you're essentially saying these large language models, they learn based on the things that we feed it, and the sources of the information that we get really matters, because that affects the outcome. So if we feed it information that is only based on a particular demographic, then you are limiting it to that. And there's an entire world of perspectives and ideas and ways of expressions that you're missing out. So you're essentially saying by being more inclusive in diversifying the sources that we use to train these language models, that becomes more representative of the world, and then becomes more of a useful model at the end of the day. That's powerful. It's a powerful insight that most people don't. I mean, I had even forgotten to bring that up, but it's so crucial to this whole topic that we've been talking about. So thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming to the Moses Kabandana Podcast, Pete Sena. If people want to follow you or learn more about you and what you're doing, and if they want to contribute to your endeavors, how and where do they go about that?
Yeah, so I'm Pete Sena on most social platforms. I'd say I'm most active right now. I read a free newsletter that I launched for forward obsessed people, and that is at petesena.com, and there's a button where you can subscribe to the newsletter. It's 100% free. I'm on Twitter, pretty active at Pete Sena, and on LinkedIn, pretty active. And if you want to know more about the work that one of my companies is doing on design and technology, you can go to digitalsurgeons.com, and that's the consultancy and the agency that I founded in my dorm room 20 years ago. Would love to connect with anybody that is interested in how to use these technologies to make their lives better, to make their businesses better, and ultimately to design demand. So thanks so much for having me on. It's really inspiring to talk to someone like yourself who just totally gets it. It's refreshing, and not all my conversations are this refreshing. So I appreciate it, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thank you for coming to the Moses Kabandana Podcast. Everybody, this is Pete Sena.